Right, hi everyone. Yeah, we're talking about text tonight. I wanted to do a stream talking about how his diagnosis has changed over the years because I've done a few streams about the psychiatry report from at the time of his trial. But you get a bit more at each parole hearing, and it changes over the years. So I thought it'd be interesting to talk about that and why. And I'm not talking about the brutality of his crimes and stuff like that tonight. So if you're watching this on playback and you're wondering why, that's because that isn't what we're discussing tonight. Basically, I'm discussing psychiatry and why, how psychiatry's changed over the years and why his diagnosis has changed, basically. But yeah, and I've done plenty of other streams where we do talk about his crimes as well. But yeah. Oh, thank you. Do you like my new cardigan? Yeah, I just bought this. Yeah. And yeah, I've even got a like and subscribe banner for text. Oh, no, it went. There you go. Like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. And yeah, there's a clip of some of the parole hearings that I'm going to play later, and there's an article that we can look at because there's some quite recent comments. The article was published in August 2025, so they're from this year, comments from text that we can talk about and all that sort of thing. Excellent. Oh, everyone likes the outfit. Oh, that's good. Jolly good. Yeah. I'll get into it pretty quickly so we've got something to talk about, obviously. Right. We're going to take a tour through 56 years of Tex Watson's psych evaluations, from brain damage and hallucinations in 1971 to being called a walking time bomb in the 80s to a doctor in 2006 basically saying, hey, he's fine now. It's a wild ride. It's a trial era. I've done a few streams about this psychiatry report, but the focus was on acute disorders, what would later be called Axis 1. The diagnosis was organic brain syndrome by Dr. Suarez and Dr. Bohr, and drug-induced psychosis and delirium, Suarez and Frank said, and drug-bathed brain with damage on EEG, which is Tweed, Arthur Tweed. And an EEG is the test where they put sensors around the head to measure brain waves and electrical activity in the brain. And they said he had hallucinations, depersonalization, and memory gaps. And what doctors thought was belladonna was actually datura, or Jimson weed, a much more toxic hallucinogen that can cause delirium, psychosis, and lasting brain effects. In his original psychiatry report, they're calling it belladonna, but it actually wasn't. Doctors also noted a sluggish pupil in one eye, which is still recognized today as a possible sign of brain damage. Debate over insanity centered on Axis 1 conditions. Personality disorders, Axis 2, were mentioned only rarely, and without using the later Axis 1-2 framework, which hadn't been introduced yet. So at the time of the murders and trial, it was all about psychosis and brain damage. He wasn't being called a sociopath or a narcissist then. It was a drug-induced insanity. And honestly, if you take enough LSD, speed, and datura, your brainwaves on an EEG are going to look like scrambled cable. The sluggish pupil is a classic sign of brain damage. Actually, a pretty good look if you're trying to mount an insanity defense. Yeah, and I just want to explain what antisocial personality disorder is in simple terms, right? Antisocial personality disorder with traits. Antisocial personality disorder is rule-breaking, manipulative, and lacks empathy. And narcissistic traits means inflated self and craves admiration. And histrionic traits means dramatic and attention-seeking. And the Axis system was used until 2013. So we don't use this now, but they did at some point during what we're going to be reading. Axis 1 is major illnesses like schizophrenia or bipolar or psychosis, etc. And Axis 2 is personality disorders, so like being a psychopath or a sociopath. We can have histrionic personality disorder, lifelong patterns, though it isn't an illness. But today, the Axis system is retired and a single spectrum model is used. ASPD may include psychopathic traits, a specifier from DSM 5, or severity levels from the ICD 11. So when you hear sociopath or psychopath, remember those are TV terms. In the clinic, it's ASPD, Antisocial Personality Disorder. Basically, no empathy, manipulative rule breaking, add narcissistic and histrionic traits, and you've got a guy who wants attention and thinks he's special while doing it. Sounds like half of Hollywood, except Watson killed people. For parole boards, ASPD was basically code for this guy's not safe to release. Right, so his 1987 parole hearing. Right, the focus is Axis 2 personality disorders. Psychological tests. So it shifts from Axis 1 to Axis 2 by 1987. Psychological tests said a very high degree of suppressed hostility. One board member said Watson is a ticking time bomb. And the diagnosis was Axis 1, no disorder. So no psychosis or depression this time. And Axis 2, they said Antisocial Personality Disorder, ASPD, with narcissistic and histrionic traits. And he's only superficially changed since 1969, they said in 1987. So by the 80s, the doctors flipped the script. Suddenly Tex isn't psychotic, he's a narcissist with a side of drama queen. They literally said walking time bomb. Translation, this guy might look calm, but under the surface, kaboom, he's praying, he's preaching, but psychiatrically, they thought he was just a new mask. The 1987 news special is one of the only moving image records of Watson from that year, showing him clean-cut, buttoned up, trying to look rehabilitated. And who do they bring in to comment? Dr. Louis Jolyon-West, UCLA psychiatry chair, LSD researcher, and yes, linked to MK Ultra sub-projects. On TV, he remarked that he didn't think Watson or the others would ever want to contact Manson again, recognizing that Manson had ruined their lives, as well as the lives of the people they killed. And I've got this clip to show you now. This is from his 1987 parole hearing. It's not letting me play it. Wait a second. I might not be able to show you this.
I went in knowing, thinking that the world was going to come to an end the next day. That's how weird my belief systems were at that particular time.
We went to bed together a couple times, but you know, I didn't consider him a lover. I feel like I was a pawn in whatever his scheme was. I think that at one point I really believed he was Jesus Christ.
These people all knew what they were doing. They were holding classes in murder where Watson would show the different family members how to stab somebody with a knife, how you put the knife in and then pull up on it so to cause more internal damage.
But the killers have publicly acknowledged both responsibility and remorse at dramatic parole board hearings like Tex Watson's.
I live with remorse day by day. I can't just come here today and show you that I'm a remorseful person or that I regret what I do. I live with it. It's part of my life. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about what I've done, who I've hurt, the shame, the guilt that is constantly put towards me by everyone that I see. It's not something that I can hide from.
But what he did,
by his own description, Watson was the all-American boy. That was before Manson.
Jesus Christ is taking the foolish things of this world which he has chosen.
In more recent years, Watson was born again. He is now the assistant to the prison chaplain. But at Watson's last parole hearing, Paul Tate was waiting, the father of Sharon Tate, whom Watson stabbed to death.
Never seen this footage before, Paul Tate.
Aware of everything as it sat, and it'll always be etched in my mind. And that man should never, never, never be turned loose on society. He hasn't changed. He hasn't changed one iota.
Tex Watson was denied parole. His next hearing is 2 years away.
He's about the only prisoner that I know of that has almost the run of the prison. He has the use of the phone in the prison chapel under there. He has this business in town. He's been allowed to get married. He has 2 kids. As a matter of fact, at the last parole hearing, they were saying, well, we don't know if he takes this seriously here because he doesn't even consider himself a prisoner anymore.
I need to ask face to face.
Susan, no, yeah.
To the remaining people, forgiveness.
Susan Atkins' chance to do that came on New Year's Eve. At the hearing was Doris Tate, Sharon Tate's mother.
I know the pain and the suffering that I caused Mrs. Tate, Mrs. Frykowski, Mr. Frykowski's son, the LaBianca family. I know. Nobody has to tell me. I know.
She's not fooling me. She was not remorseful for killing Sharon.
It didn't bother her a bit. So you're going to turn people like this loose on the streets?
The parole board answered no in Susan Atkins' case, denying her a parole date for another 3 years. Patricia Krenwinkel, convicted of the Tate and LaBianca murders, described by prosecutors as a very hard case, was denied a parole date last September. Finally, Leslie Van Houten, long ago a homecoming princess at Monrovia High. On her lawyer's advice, Van Houten did not testify at her last hearing. She was denied a release date, but the board indicated her suitability for parole is not far off. In 1978, she was free on bail during a retrial. If Van Houten or the others were released, what then? That's the parole board's dilemma. But Dr. Lewis West, head of UCLA's Neuropsychiatric Institute, thinks none of them would want to see Charles Manson.
I think most of them have recovered their contact with reality and realized that they were involved in something horrendous. That he was an evil and dangerous influence. He destroyed their lives as well as the lives of the people he killed and their families. And the last thing in the world they'd want to do would be to get near him again, I think.
In preparing this report, Manson and the other killers either refused to be interviewed by us or set limitations we refused to accept.
Right.
So
and then the whole thing just loops.
And so warped by drugs that they carried out.
There. Right, so that was the clip, but that was like a little clip of his 87 parole hearing, which is what I've talked about. And there's a full version of that parole hearing where you hear them reading out this psychiatry report that I quoted. Right, so psychopath versus sociopath versus antisocial personality disorder. Right, psychopath and sociopath are not clinical terms anymore. In modern psychiatry, it's antisocial personality disorder. So think of it like an empathy dial. 0 empathy is a psychopath, what we used to call a psychopath, cold, calculated, no remorse. Or some empathy and emotional outbursts is a sociopath. Though they never directly call text this, they say narcissist and, what's the other one, histrionic. But yeah, in the DSM-5, antisocial personality disorder with psychopathic traits is the closest you'll normally get. A true psychopath is 0% empathy, zero capability for empathy. Paris Bennett is an example of that. If you look up interviews with a psycho called Paris Bennett, he's been declared 0 empathy. And the ICD-11 is how they measure the severity in traits, dissociality and disinhibition. So think of it like an empathy thermostat. Turn it all the way down to 0, that's what pop culture calls a psychopath. And leave just a little bit of warmth for family or random outbursts of emotion, that's a sociopath. But here's the nuance. Sociopaths are capable of feeling remorse when reflecting on what they've done, and they can feel empathy. They just can repress it while committing acts of violence. Clinically, they are both ASPD, and for parole boards, those labels stick. Right, and now this is, the really crazy ones. This is from 2001 and 2006, basically. So Dr. Ronald Roston said, Watson is articulate, rational, and has no neurological impairment, no psychiatric disorder. ASPD diagnosis considered in full remission, and his GAF score is 90, very high functioning. The GAF is a scale from 0 to 100 that doctors use to rate how well someone can function in daily life. Functioning means things like being able to dress yourself, keep yourself clean, manage your cell, interact with others appropriately. A score of 90 basically means he was handling everyday life extremely well. But the panel are still skeptical. They're concerned his faith might be a substitute of one dependency, Manson, for another, Christianity. So this is the era of text the born again. The doctor said, hey, he's articulate, rational, and has no disorders, and even gave him a GAF score of 90, which is like an A+ in functioning. So clinically, they even use the phrase in full remission, something you seldom hear with ASPD. So wow, he totally recovered from being a sociopath, praise Jesus. Except the parole board wasn't buying it. They're worried he just swapped out Manson for the Bible. But yeah, from 2001, they've been saying he's all right now, basically. And then this is his most recent one. The comprehensive risk assessment of him by Dr. Misha, 2021. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Sorry if I butchered your name. Past diagnosis was reviewed. ASPD, narcissistic traits and borderline features said that the current findings say no major mental disorder, no current personality disorder, substance use disorders are in remission, absence of personality disorder behaviours for 52 years. In fact, Dr. Misha basically dismissed the 1987 labels, saying Watson hadn't shown those behaviours for over 50 years. So this psychiatrist is saying that the 1987 one was wrong, right? Low risk for future violence, HCR 20, a checklist doctors use to rate the risk of future violence based on history, clinical state, and risk factors. So it's what they have to consider when they're considering whether they're suitable to be released. And they said, yeah, he has a low risk for future violence. And the board's reaction is still to deny parole, concerned about lack of deep insight despite psychiatric clearance. So fast forward to 2021, the shrink says no mental illness, no personality disorder, substance abuse, long gone. They even called him a low risk, 50 plus years clean, and yes, you can recover from drug-induced brain damage if you stay clean long enough. But the board still said no. Why? Because they thought he never fully explained why he did it. Insight means recognizing and understanding why you did what you did, how it harmed others, and showing you've really processed it. For Watson, the board felt he still hadn't done that, even if the psychiatrist said he was low risk today. So yeah, that's clinically what insight means when you hear in parole hearings. They have low insight. It means, yeah, they do not. And he has always, he seems to sort of disassociate from the crime altogether. And he acts like he's been born again, like he's a monk or something. Do you know what I mean? He's been born again. So yeah, I can see what they mean by he doesn't appear to have insight. So why does his diagnosis change so much? Right, in the 1970s, DSM-2 and early DSM-3, there was a heavy focus on psychosis and organic brain damage and drug delirium. Courts leaned on insanity versus not insane, binary categories. So when he was first tried. Then in the 1980s, it's the DSM-3 era, the rise of Axis 2 personality disorders. Notorious criminals, often branded psychopaths or sociopaths, without formalized tools. PCLR wasn't widely adopted in the US until the late 80s or early 90s. Media and some psychiatrists exaggerated labels, similar to the UK extreme psychopath with Charles Bronson and Ronnie Cray. Though in the US it was often incurable sociopath or dangerous psychopath. And in the 2000s, a more structured use of risk assessment tools like HCR 20 and GAF. ASPD described as in remission, a new way of framing behaviour over time. And today, we've got the DSM-5 and the ICD-11. Diagnosis is dimensional with severity ratings and trait specifiers. Personality disorder as a spectrum, not yes or no. So labels like extreme psychopath wouldn't pass modern clinical standards. You can see Watson's file changing, not because he changed, but because psychiatry did. In the 70s, he was psychotic. In the 80s, he was a time bomb sociopath. In the 2000s, he was in remission. And today, he's no disorder, low risk. That's not inconsistency, that's the system rewriting itself. Back in the 80s, US psychiatrists did exactly what the UK did with Ronnie Cray or Charles Bronson. They inflated labels for notorious prisoners. They didn't invent extreme psychopath in America, but they basically said the same thing: hopeless, incurable, permanently dangerous. Today, with DSM-5 and ICD-11, psychiatrists would never invent a one-off label for someone. They'd measure traits, severity, and risk on a spectrum instead. So that is why the diagnosis changes so much. It's not because he has changed, it's just the way it's done has changed so much. And of course, he doesn't display the same behaviour as he displayed when he was 24 years old, you know. He is a bloody 79-year-old man, or however old he is, isn't he now, you know. So the key takeaway from all this is the psychiatric narrative shifted from illness, personality disorder, into remission, no diagnosis. Each era reflects both, changing psychiatric models, changing legal strategies in parole decisions. Despite improved evaluations, parole was always denied due to crime severity, doubts about insight. Yeah, so don't worry, just because he's been cleared, that doesn't mean that they will ever let him out. It's because of the brutality of his crimes. So what's the takeaway? Psychiatry changed, Watson changed, but the parole board never did. No matter what label the doctors gave him, brain damage, sociopath, recovered, or just fine, the board said the same thing: you're not getting out. And here's something important. The way psychiatrists assess and diagnose people has changed massively since 1970. Back then, the DSM-2 was still in use, with the Axis 1 and Axis 2 system only arriving in DSM-3, which came in 1980. So by 2013, DSM-5 is dropped, and the whole multi-axial model in favour of dimensional assessments. And ICD-11 now looks at personality disorders as spectrums of severity and traits. That explains why Watson's labels shift so much over time. They reflect the tools of the era as much as the man himself. See the American Psychiatric Association DSM-5 from 2013 and the World Health Organization ICD-11 2018. If you're interested in these things and you want more information, I won't bore people too much, but that's the source for it all if you want accurate information. In the US, psychiatry is anchored in the DSM system. In the UK and NHS practice, the ICD-11 is the official standard, with professional guidance from the Royal College of Psychiatrists. And most recently, in August 2025, Watson himself said, when another inmate asked him if he had hope for parole, he replied, "I did too much." So at least he's realistic about his chances of ever getting out. I can show you some of that interview in a minute as well. Written interview. And this is just a note for UK viewers in case you're looking into how dangerous prisoners like Ronnie Cray or Charles Bronson have been classified in the UK. Official system for us is the ICD-11, World Health Organization, mandatory in the NHS. Though forensics, so prison psychology, isn't run by the NHS now. Professional body is the Royal College of Psychiatrists, sets UK training and standards. And the DSM-5 is not the rulebook here, but it is still widely referenced for detailed research and forensic reporting. In forensic practice, in the UK, psychiatrists often compare ICD and DSM side by side when writing about high-profile or violent prisoners. So if you're in the UK and researching how violent prisoners like Cray or Bronson were described, check the ICD-11 first, but don't be surprised if you see DSM criteria quoted too. Even though it's American, UK psychiatrists often use it to flesh out reports and risk assessments. And just to note, outside the US and UK, the DSM is only partly used. Most European countries like Germany and France have their own systems built around the ICD, sometimes with extra national guidelines. That's just a note in case anyone's researching. God, it zoomed right in on me now. How do I get to zoom out again? Go on. What can I do now? Come on. There we go. There. Yeah. Yeah, well, and just the way they have, it's, very difficult to explain, obviously. And I tried to, well, it's complicated. I've tried to explain it to you, telling you just what you need to know to try and make it as simple as possible. But it's about the way they assess them now. It's totally different, basically. They are much more specific, and no one is called just a psychopath or a sociopath anymore. Really, we just say that in true crime when we're discussing crime because it's people basically understand what that means. A sociopath is capable of some empathy, but not much, basically, and a psychopath has no empathy whatsoever. People understand that, don't they? So. We still do, but now it would be ASPD with psychopathic traits or ASPD with sociopath traits or whatever, and histrionic traits is the dramatic one. I don't see that in text so much. I can see it in Susan Leslie and Charles Manson himself, but I don't see histrionic in text so much. I don't know. But then we've never actually sat and interviewed him, have we? We only see footage of him, so we don't know. Maybe if you're actually sat interviewing him, he does come across like that. Yeah, well, Stephen Kay said there in that clip in 1987 he was allowed to walk around the prison like he wasn't even a prisoner, and he doesn't even consider himself a prisoner. And he had 2 kids at that point in 87. He ended up having 4, didn't he? It is so strange, the way he was treated in the 80s. And that's when they were saying he was really heavy and dangerous as well. So why was he allowed to walk around so freely around the prison, you know? I thought him and Bobby didn't like each other. I don't know. Because from what he's saying, he appears to be saying in his psychiatry report, he did cut off all contact with the Manson family right from his arrest. He was never in contact with any of them, I don't think. Though I know at some point in the 80s he made a statement saying that he killed everyone and the girls didn't do anything, so he took responsibility for all the murders. But then quite recently he gave an interview to the Daily Mail. Well, it was actually a weird thing. He wrote a letter to Wikipedia, and that ended up being reported on in the Daily Mail. And he wrote that he didn't kill Abigail Folger. Krenwinkel did, basically. So he threw Krenwinkel under the bus suddenly. He went from taking responsibility for all the murders to throwing Krenwinkel under the bus quite recently. Do we have a look at what he said recently? Let me just scroll down to it. Well, go on. Sorry, technical difficulties. Yeah, quite a funny title. I was Charles Manson's henchman and butchered pregnant Sharon Tate. Here's the truth about that night. Spoiler alert, he doesn't tell the truth about that night. So I won't read most of it. I'll just read the interesting comments he makes towards the end here. Right. I was asked this exact question this morning by an inmate while walking back to cell from breakfast, said Watson, in answer to whether Krenwinkel's case gave him any cause for optimism ahead of his next parole hearing, slated for October 2026. He thought it gave me hope, but I told him I did too much. He said, at least you're honest. Krenwinkel's fate still rests with California Governor Gavin Newsom, who blocked her release in 2022, citing a risk for future dangerousness. Watson said he believed that Newsom would most likely deny Krenwinkel's parole again in the interest of his own political aspirations. It's hard for me to get excited for Patricia, since Governor Newsom will probably be running for president in 2028 and will deny her request because of politics, he said. Her Manson connection continues to keep her in prison. Since his conviction, yeah, we know that. But yeah, that was the interesting comments he made. But again, yeah, rather chucking Krenwinkel under the bus again, isn't he? He says, yeah, he's not too hopeful for Krenwinkel. I'm not either. Don't think anyone is, are they? And should they get out, really? After the way she brutally chased down that woman, the way she did, Abigail Folger was chased down and she was running away from her. Horrible. Yeah, I think, no, she's only said about stabbing him in the legs. She didn't say anything about stabbing him in the torso. And she at one point said she stabbed Sharon a couple of times at the penalty phase. She said she did stab Sharon, but she then later said she didn't stab Sharon. But at the grand jury, she also said she didn't stab Sharon. So, yeah, it's like, what the hell? But no, I don't think she's only ever said she stabbed Frykowski in the legs, I think. Yeah. Yeah, it's very horrible. And looking at it's very hard to get an account of what happened to the LaBiancas as well at the LaBiancas. All we really get is Leslie's account at the penalty phase. But it looks like she must have done, Krenwinkel, must have done most of the stabbing of Rosemary LaBianca as well. Because they say Leslie didn't stab her while she was alive, don't they, now? Though at penalty phase, Leslie did say she stabbed Rosemary while she was alive, but she later said she didn't she? So, who knows? We'll never know what happened, will we? But yeah, like I say, I was shocked when they let Leslie out, basically. If you go way back on my channel, I did a stream about Leslie saying, they'll never let her out. They're never going to let any of them go, sort of thing, saying, no, they'll never let her out, but they have let her out. But if you look into what happened with her trials as well, at her third trial, her conviction was completely overturned, basically, and she was only convicted of killing the LaBiancas as part of a robbery, not the whole TLB murder conspiracy thing. So she actually should have been released sometime in the 90s. So it was actually a miscarriage of justice. They still had her in prison. I think recalibrating the psych designations, like you explained so well, did they kind of drop the threshold of being psychopathic over the decades, or did Watson heal? Well, I think what it was, in the past, they didn't really have any regulations for what made someone a psychopath. The psychiatrists decided it themselves, sort of thing. But now there's very strict criteria that you have to meet more than a certain amount of to get diagnosed as a psychopath. I think that's what's happened. It was more in the past the psychiatrist could just say whatever he wanted, and these people were sensationalized so much, weren't they, obviously? And what they did is just undeniably incredibly brutal, isn't it? They killed more than one person who were, like, terrified, and they invaded people's homes and killed people, didn't they? All these things make what they did awful. And it's difficult to believe that they don't have a personality disorder. If they don't have a personality disorder, how were they capable of doing this? You know what I mean? I don't believe, that they don't have personality disorders, to be honest. I think they all must have had some kind of disorder just to be able to do what they did. Excuse me. No, this is the thing as well. You don't see many TV interviews of him. Only done by Christians, basically, and they would have been on a VCR and someone's uploaded it to YouTube. There's a few interviews of him like that, but he's only ever interviewed by like soft evangelical people that, and it makes it look like a tragedy. You know how there is like a film where it's like it shows him as a little boy. There's an actor as a little boy, watching himself as a teenager being walked into a prison cell on death row, and he's a little boy's going, "Oh no, why? What did I do?" sort of thing. You know, as if showing how tragic it is. You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, that's a film I've seen, and he's interviewed in that. But I've never seen any interview of him. No, you just see him at the parole hearing, don't you? And that's it. I'm surprised more people haven't tried to interview him as well for books, because Manson certainly got interviewed all the time, didn't he? Hmm. Yeah, that's it. And they probably weren't as strict about, not being influenced by your preconceptions about them because of what they did as well. I phrased that poorly, but that's actually a clinical thing as well. You have to not, consider, your emotion about what they did. Basically, yeah, that's a better way of putting it. Yeah, if you're a psychiatrist and you're assessing someone for a clinical reason, you're not supposed to think of your own emotion about how horrible what they did was. You're supposed to just, use the criteria to decide. But in the past, they probably were more emotional. DoorDasher. They mean, oh, that's delivering food, isn't it? The Go Eats people that deliver food. They're saying, yeah, when she gets out, she'll end up, delivering your food. But yeah, I don't think. Yeah, well, I don't know. What do people think? You guys live in America. I don't think that she's going to get let out. To be quite honest, I think that they'll consider it more seriously though, and she might have a chance to go back and plead something about domestic abuse as well, because there's a law changing. So yeah, I'm gonna talk about it more when it happens, if it does happen. There's no point telling you about it if it's never going to happen. But if it does happen, yeah, there is something she can claim. There's a new law she can claim on, if their abuse wasn't disclosed properly at the time of their trial, and arguably it wasn't with the Manson girls, was it? So yeah, that's it. Well, like I say, you can find streams on my channel where I'm going, they'll never let her out, she'll never get out, but they fucking did, didn't they? Yeah. But like I say, when you look into her situation, her third trial, her conviction was completely different to the others. She's not convicted of the same thing. These have got far less chance of getting let out because they're still all convicted of 7 counts of murder. She was only convicted of 2, and it was as part of a robbery. It completely changed. Because you see, what happened at her second trial was, at her second trial, they brought her mental health into it, and they were nearly going to let her walk then. So Stephen K freaked out and got declared a mistrial. And so then at the third trial, instead of they used the robbery, because if you use robbery, they don't have to consider their mental health, so her mental health wouldn't be brought up. So this is why the third trial went the way it did. And then yeah, she ends up only convicted of killing 2 people in part of a robbery, and she should have been out sometime in the 90s. Quite shocking. Yeah, well, I have to say, having looked really deeply into her now and found out as much as I can about her, I do feel bad for her, because she seems like the least likely to become a violent person. If you look at all their track records, like Susan Atkins obviously had a lot of problems. I believe she might have had fetal alcohol even, and obviously drug abuse. She was on a lot of drugs, wasn't she? I think there was something wrong with her. And even Leslie had reason to be antisocial, you know what I mean? She'd been forced to have an abortion and bury the fetus in the garden and stuff like this, so she had reason to become messed up, didn't she? But Patricia Krenwinkel was actually, she went to Bible camp and she played the piano, and she had, it's just so crazy. She seems like the least likely to become a killer. If anything, she was the kind of person that liked to help get things done. She was like the junior camper. She organised things, and she helped people get things done and that. And like, it's just in this dark situation, what needed to be done was people needed to be stabbed, and she came forward and did it when the others couldn't, or whatever, and that is what has fucked her up. She's never going to get out of prison now. That's it. But it's hard to feel sorry for her because of what she did, because it was so brutal what she did to Abigail Folger, wasn't it? That face, what she did to her face haunts me. It's awful. Sorry, someone made a comment there. Oh, I want to say. So if you're mixing your emotions as a psychiatrist in assessing a super nasty psychotic stabbing spree, you kind of mimic a psychotic by going emotionally void. Yeah, yikes, it's spreading. Yeah. Yeah, but they're not supposed to use words like in a psychiatric report like monster and evil and stuff like that, because that's not what these are like media terms. This isn't like, these aren't clinical terms that they would normally use. Mm. Yeah, also, you have more sympathy for Krenwinkel. You talk about Krenwinkel. Because you don't have any for text, do you? But you have more for her. Well, yeah, I've heard as well. Someone commented on on one of the videos I made about her that they met a woman who picks up the service dogs from prisons, and she didn't know, but the woman that she was meeting and picking the dogs up from was Patricia Krenwinkel, and she met her quite regularly for a few years, and said she seemed like a really nice lady. I had no idea who she was, because she trains service dogs in her prison, doesn't she? Yeah. Yeah, that's the other thing as well, isn't it? How would the family feel? And I know Lino LaBianca's nephew is still really badly affected by it. That's why Deborah Tate goes to the LaBianca parole hearings, because she's asked to by the LaBianca family, because he can't do it. He's so upset by it. So yeah, that's the other thing that you got to think about when they decide if they're going to let Krenwinkel out, because of what she did at the LaBiancas too. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. There are reasons, but it's not their excuse, is it? There's not an excuse, is it? That's like you say. You've also got to take into account they were so young as well. They were all around. I think the girls were all between like 19 and 21 at the time of the crimes, weren't they? And Tex was 23. Bobby was only 21. They were little more than kids, and they were really messed up on drugs. And it was a really weird time. I've done things about the While the World Burned series I did, and I talk about how the Vietnam War was affecting young people and their exposure to dehumanization training when they're in Vietnam, the young men, and then they're coming back and they were giving them no reintegration help or anything. These people were just walking about having had this disturbing dehumanization training. And they were joining bike gangs, so probably met the Manson family, Some of the Manson family were in Vietnam and were in doing the kind of thing where they would have had the dehumanization training. And just, the whole, God, I've rambled there. Yeah, what was my overall point with that was, just like it was such a strange time. It was such a weird set of circumstances that led to them doing it. And I don't think that the same things would ever occur again and make them do it again. I don't think any of them would ever have become as violent as they did if it weren't for this weird set of circumstances. And I don't think that they would again at the age they are now. I mean, if you let Bobby out, he's not going to go running with bikers and selling mescaline now, is he? He's only got one lung left. I'm sure he just wants a quiet life, you know what I mean? It's like... and Krenwinkel and Susan Atkins. I didn't realise Susan Atkins had a leg amputated by the time she died as well, and they wouldn't give her compassionate release. And I think now, what the hell is she going to do? Hop into the Hollywood Hills and kill people? It's not, why wouldn't they give her compassionate release? But then people always say, oh, where was her compassion for Sharon Tate or whatever? Yeah, there's always an argument, isn't there? But yeah. Yeah, well, it haunts me. This is why I'm interested in psychology and human behavior, because I like to understand why would someone do these things. It's not an excuse, but we can talk about what makes people do these things. And there are a lot of reasons why these people did that. And I don't think that they naturally would have done it if it weren't for the crazy set of circumstances they'd ended up under. There was an abusive relationship with Manson involved. There was all sorts happening. All the drugs they were taking, because in them days people weren't so aware of drug psychosis and that. It was from the fucking late 60s that we learned all this, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, that's it. It was a unique psychological, societal, historical soup that went sour. Yeah, and it's just, Well, this is, yeah, the other thing as well, because none of these kids felt so bad they handed themselves in, did they? They all had to be hunted down. They eventually did once the police had tracked them down and said, if you don't hand yourself in. But yeah, Krenwinkel and Tex handed themselves in under duress, didn't they? But all the rest had to be hunted down and arrested, didn't they? So, you know, in terms of remorse, none of them felt so bad they went straight to the police, did they? You know, they ran away from the crime scene, they cleaned up, you know. Yeah, oh, that's the $1,000,000 question, isn't it? What the hell does Tex say on the Tex tapes? Yeah, that's to a lawyer as well. Aren't there tapes? Aren't they tapes with a lawyer before his trial as well? But there's probably more. There's probably lots of different tapes, isn't there, as well? Because I don't think there's no tapes of his police interviews. I've never seen anything about his police interviews ever. You find Bobby's, but he must have been interviewed by the fucking police, mustn't he? Why can we never see any of his interviews? What did he actually say? Is it because he says he went up there because they'd robbed his girlfriend? They owed his girlfriend money. Well, no, I mean Linda Kasabian, yeah. Right, yeah, and well, I want to do an updated thing about his drug use as well, because I found there's an extract from another book he wrote, Not Will You Die For Me. There's another book, and he does actually give a whole there's a whole statement about his drug use. And he says something about the rosewood seeds. He says he found out what rosewood seeds were. Must have been from psychiatrists in prison. And it's strychnine, apparently, is the active ingredient. So he'd taken strychnine when he took the rosewood seeds and that. And I had not seen that at the time that I did the stream about what he says about drugs in the psychiatry report. So I can add that. Because I do like talking about psychology and psychiatry. People aren't so interested in it generally. People just want to watch the one about what he said about the crimes directly. They're not interested in anything other aspect of it. But I could sit and talk about it for hours. I find it fascinating. Like they made him do a thing called the draw a person test, which is what they do to assess your mental age. They were trying to, because back in 1970 or 71, they still had to prove he could reasonably and maturely reflect. There was two parts to the insanity defense. So they had to prove he wasn't retarded, basically. He didn't have a reduced mental age. So they asked him to draw a person. And I thought I'd never find it, but somewhere in those boxes of evidence that Bo Emerson from Zillow Drive put online, I found his draw a person test, what he drew when they told him to draw a person. And yeah, not very good. He was no artist. No, Charles Winans didn't teach him to paint, I can tell you that much. Fucking hell. Or maybe that's why he's such a bad artist. Maybe Charles Winans did teach him to draw. Who knows? Yeah, well, I think Tex is right. Yeah, no, well, Tex, yeah, because he for political reasons he'll say no, but she can do what Leslie did though as well, can't she? And appeal the governor if she's got a strong enough case, and they might have to they can override him, can't they? But they can back him into a corner as well, because with Leslie he had to say yes, because if he didn't, she'd sue, and the governor every governor in the future, even after him, might get stripped of the ability to intervene in parole hearings if he didn't, because her case was so good, basically. But I can't see Krenwinkel achieving that, to be honest, because of how brutal what she did was. I don't think even with the domestic abuse stuff, it's enough mitigation. To be quite honest, I don't think that they'll accept that. So unless it actually comes out that there was like some kind of horrible abuse going on at Zillow Drive, and she was somehow, involved in that or whatever. But they're never going to reveal that sort of thing, are they? If that is true. Yeah, well, there is one of Leslie's parole hearings. Deborah Tate makes a comment. She says something like that. So maybe she heard it from her dad. Yeah, because she said, I don't think they should be let out because I don't want anyone else to get hurt. Deborah Tate said that at a parole hearing. So is that because there was a team of people ready to waiting at the gate for him? Bloody hell. That's really weird. Yeah, I'd never heard that. Yeah, that Paul Tate was yeah, because Deborah Tate. Well, I won't repeat myself. I just said it again, didn't I? Yeah. Right, we've been going for 50 minutes now, so I could end this and go to an after show. Oh, Jeremy, are you here now? Are you on your laptop yet, Jeremy? So I've got to send you the link for the after show, ain't I? And I'll send it to you, Capone. When the song starts up, I'll send you both the link when I start the after show, yeah? Oh, and if you was watching last week, I said about Dweezil Zappa, and that they had to give him another name on his birth certificate. I found it in here, so I'll talk about that in the after show as well, if people want to know what Dweezil Zappa's birth certificate name was. It's fucking complicated. He had about 4. You're on the laptop now, are you? Right, so I'll end this now, because we've been going for quite a while, and I don't want to go too off topic on this one. But yeah, like I say, if you were researching for something serious like your writing or whatever, I gave you the information for where to go to look for more detail if you are interested in more advanced psychiatry about this sort of thing. Yeah. Yeah, so I'll end this now. Yeah, that's the other thing as well. Yeah, we've got to add this here. It is awful that they have to repeatedly testify to keep them in prison. And you notice, another thing I've noticed now, the way the media covers murderers is not the same as it was in the 70s and 80s. They don't do so many. Well, they actually are banned from filming the men in California, I think, aren't they? And recording the men in California. So that's possibly why you don't see so many. But it's cruel to the victims' families, isn't it? Seeing the murderer getting interviewed on the TV all the time. You know, and Charles Manson, there's so many interviews of Charles Manson, it got ridiculous, didn't it? You know, it's probably why they banned them from being able to interview them because of Charles Manson, wasn't it? Yeah. I found a bloody interview of Richard Ramirez, and it looked like he was actually on a panel show. It didn't look like he was on a screen and it was being boomed into the studio. It looked like they had brought him into the studio, and I was like, what the fuck? Would they bring a prisoner into a bloody chat show and have him on the panel? Weird. Ah, yeah, Restless Souls. I think that is on archive.org. I think I looked at it, yeah. But I think that's another book that's been a bit discredited as well, though, so watch it. Yeah, I think it's a bit discredited as a source, but yeah. Yeah, anyway, I'll go to an after show now, so give me a minute and then the after show will start up. Right. And if not, I'll see you next week. Thank you for coming. Like and subscribe if you haven't already.